Good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining us for our second TDA Bitesize session, again in association with Big Wave Media. So we've got Simon Beer from Big Wave as the digital director. He'll be talking to you all this morning. The format will be the same as last week for those that were on, but for those that weren't, Simon will do a presentation. There'll be an opportunity to ask questions. So at the bottom of your screen, if you're on a laptop, there's a chat icon. So if you've got any questions, if you could type them in there, we'll ask those at the end. Simon has said he's happy to take questions at any time, but I have muted everybody, so that's going to be quite difficult. There'll be another session this time next week. So again, if you're interested, it's James Twigger from Accounting for Everything. He's going to be talking about all the grant schemes, all the funding that's available for businesses, which you may or may not know about. This session will be recorded and it will be shared on our social media sessions, our social media pages. A copy of the slides will be available. So you should get an email from Eventbrite after the session to say if you want a copy of the slides. And Kim, myself are available for any business support that you might be interested in. Again, check our Eventbrite page and we can book up some sessions. So without further ado, I will hand you over to Simon.
Thank you. So I'll just share my screen. I can see some familiar faces from last week, so welcome back, those that have come back. So last week we talked about digital marketing and we looked at quite a range of tools and things that you could do to enhance your digital marketing or to venture into digital marketing if you weren't doing it. This week is all about building a marketing plan or campaign plan for reopening. So getting back into the swing of things, hopefully getting businesses, getting customers back in either through the doors or taking out your services. So obviously we've got a range of different businesses on this session. So what I've done, is similar to last week, is I've chosen things that are relatively universal. So no matter what sector you're in or the size of your business, these are things that could be useful or are things that could be in place or should be in place as building blocks for you as a business. And the session's aims today, so we're going to look at messaging. That's the kind of starting point. So what kind of messaging should we be building into the communications that we're going to start sending out from a marketing perspective? We'll look at the building blocks. So the building blocks, the foundations of your marketing, which are hopefully in place, and depending on, again, the size of your business or the type of business, you'll have different needs and different requirements. We're just looking at some of the fundamentals there. We won't touch hugely on that. We'll look at audiences. Got one missing. We'll look at re-engaging with customers or your clients, creating the campaign plan, and then we'll finish off with measurement. And there is a toolkit that's available, and I'll give a link at the end of this. So we've created a little pack. It's a zip file with various Word document and Excel files in it that if you want to kind of basis or framework for creating a campaign plan or creating a campaign report, then there's some free tools there if you want to use it. So just to give you a little bit of context as to who we are and where some of this information and this knowledge kind of comes from. Big Wave Media is a creative growth agency. So we've been going for about 14 years this year. We have 45 plus staff based out of offices in Torquay, Exeter and Plymouth, but we work across the UK and we work with quite a number of organisations in different sectors and different industries. In total, we host around 300 websites and manage and work on 180 plus Facebook pages. So we're touching a lot of data. We see a lot of campaigns coming through, a lot of campaigns that are being run up and down the country. So we get a fairly good broad idea of what works and what doesn't work and how people are tackling things differently. So before we start with messaging, I just want to touch on the three cores that run through this session. So what I haven't done is create the presentation around these three things, so that there isn't a big section on develop, section on improve, or a section on communicate. But these are the things that are threads that run throughout all of the slides that we'll go through. So I just wanted to touch on that, just to kind of bring it to the forefront as something in your minds when you're building your campaign plan for recovery. So first thing is develop. So develop data-driven marketing. It's all about segmenting and targeting your customers to better understand and communicate with their needs. And we will touch on that when we get into re-engaging and audiences. Second is improve. So improving your digital engagement. And this is all about choosing the right channels and the right touch points. And we'll again look at that when we talk about audience, but re-engagement and building your campaign plan. And then lastly, communicating and communicating clearly. And that's something that is very necessary at the moment, given the situation we all find ourselves in. And I got some good examples of that that we'll pepper through it. And that kind of brings us into the first section of this session, which is around messaging. So when we typically think about marketing's kind of core aim is to build awareness. So build awareness of a product or of a service, and you're really driving people to have a desire to want something and to want it from you. And the end goal of that is to create a sale. So you want to sell something, which is a product or service. But it's kind of ancillary because sales takes over at that point. But if you don't sell anything, it's pointless doing any marketing. So if the marketing doesn't sell anything, then you may as well give up on it. But when we think about a campaign, whilst, it's certainly building awareness, you can have two different types of campaign. You can have a general awareness campaign, and the likes of big brands like Coca-Cola and McDonalds and Adidas and Nike and so on, they all do big brand awareness campaigns because they've got deep pockets and they can get in front of a lot of people, and that's the premise. It's get in front of people and be front of mind when they get to the point where they want whatever it is. So if they want a pair of trainers, they'll think of Nike, or if they want something to eat, they'll think of McDonald's. Whereas when we do sales orientated campaigns, it is pushing a specific product, and generally that involves pushing a specific price point or a specific product feature, and that becomes the focus of the campaign. But where we are at the moment, in the current landscape, we've got to think much more about awareness. And the reason for that is because it's got to be around confidence and building confidence. So as you reopen, so if you're a store, if you have a shop front, then it's about building confidence for people to come in, to feel safe. If you are a service business, it's about building confidence in how you're going to deliver that service, either at distance or with the restrictions that are in place and the confines that you find yourself in. How can you still deliver a good service with all that going on? So the messaging, certainly the initial messaging, has got to be around confidence. And I'll show you some examples of this in a second. I just wanted to share something that I've stolen from a Torbay Business Forum breakfast seminar that happened this week. So Steve Reynolds shared this, and I thought this is a great kind of visualization of the emotional stages that people go through when you have change. And that context was about employees and about the state of where we are at the moment. I think if you apply this to the marketing and you think about how you need to communicate with people, it's a really good example of how to do that. So there's 4 stages. You have denial. So if we think about this from a marketing perspective, lost it. There we go. So from a marketing perspective, so denial, this is the phase where changes is starting to happen. People are getting that information. This is all about giving information about what that change is. So initially, when we went into this lockdown, it was about your opening times changing. It was about changes to the way that you operate, changes to your deliveries or your services. Coming out of it is exactly the same messaging, but it's about what are your new opening times? How are your systems changing to adapt to any of the new restrictions that might be in place? So it's about information. As we get to resistance, so people then go into a phase where they start to resist the change because they start to think of barriers or reasons why maybe they can't adapt to it or may struggle to adapt to it. So at this stage, from a marketing perspective, it's about preparing responses. And that might be things like FAQs. So if people are going to be thinking, well, how does that work? Like, how can I access this from you? Or how will I get this from you? How will this work in reality? FAQs could be a really good way to do that. So starting to build up FAQs, answering the questions that your customers might have, as they start to come back to thinking about using you. And also crisis management. So thinking about those things that might happen that you don't want to happen, but might, like instances or someone becoming ill or whatever it might be. It's coming up with responses to those things in advance. So it will help you, certainly, but it also helps the customer to get their head around how they can safely use your services or your products or whatever it might be. And thinking about those barriers might be a way to rephrase or rethink about how you actually sell your products or your services. So if cost is a barrier, because coming out of this, if people have got less income, or as a business, they're coming out and they have got less income going through their business, it means that they might need to delay payment for things that they need as a business to get operational until such time when they have the income. They may be offering things like deferred payments or free trials. That could be a good way to overcome those barriers and to still win the business. And that could be a key part of your marketing message once you've got past the confidence kind of piece. As you get into exploration, this is where people are looking for solutions, so that they're now actively looking for solutions to the things that they came up with as barriers in their resistance. And this is where your marketing materials come in. So this is having things like brochures and guides or booklets and things like that. So creating those kind of COVID-specific marketing materials. If you had a whole suite of materials prior to this, then do they need updating? So do you need to change things to say how things have changed, or how things are now different from your service delivery? And then the final one is commitment. So at that stage, people have adapted. They are ongoingly adapting. I'm not sure that's a word, but they're adapting on an ongoing basis. And that's really about your messaging. So about support. It's about maybe seeking referrals from people that have gone through this process or have used your product or service and are now comfortable with it. So I've got some examples of how the confidence piece is feeding through and how you can use it. And this is an example for Bristol Airport. So the airports are starting to gear up to offer flights, and there's domestic flights that are popping up for places like Aberdeen and Belfast from Bristol. And this is a good example, I think, of how they're using the confidence messaging to start that initial conversation and that initial part of marketing. So this is an e-flyer that Bristol Airport sent out. This is the first one they sent out since the lockdown. So at the start of lockdown, they sent stuff out saying why they closed, how they closed, all that kind of stuff. And now this is the first one they've sent out, the other side of it, to tell you about how they're getting back and connecting up. But rather than being the sales message to say, come and fly because we got flights that it's open and all that kind of stuff, they've gone with Reconnect in the UK. So they've presented themselves as a solution to getting the UK up and running again. So they kind of framed themselves as a bit of a hero in that kind of way, and helping to reconnect the UK. And then they've used terminology like protection measures, ensuring it's safe to travel, when the time is right. So they're using words and phrases that are mitigating the potential barriers that you might have if you go through that resistance stage. So, is it going to be safe? Will it be okay to travel? So it's saying, when the time is right. So it's pushing it back on yourself. And then they follow up with more sales focused marketing. And this is a promotion that they've run. And I think they sent this out a couple of days after the first one. So they send the confidence piece, then they send a sales message. So then now they're trying to solicit an actual sale, but they're still using confidence within that. And this time the confidence piece, or the barrier rephrasing, is around peace of mind. So peace of mind, free cancellations, flexibility, best price. So they're still ticking various boxes, but they've taken a kind of two-step approach to build confidence and then to sell. If you look across the sector, a lot of the other airlines are doing, a lot of the other airports and airlines are doing similar things. So EasyJet have launched something called the Europe with Confidence Pledge. So they're pledging to safely get you into Europe. And then if you go on to any of their other materials after that, you get sales messages, which doesn't really look like we've been away, you know, when you start to see those kind of things, and the price points as well. So again, confidence and then sales. So I've got a bigger example. This is from McDonald's. So McDonald's have had very consistent messaging throughout the whole of the lockdown period, and now as we're coming out of that, again, very consistent messaging, but all around confidence and around safety. So a lot of their messaging during the lockdown was about safety. It was about reasons why they were closed, about looking after their staff and so on. And then as we've kind of moved in the last few weeks, they've started to obviously open up and doing trials with drive-throughs. And I was talking to Kim earlier about her daughter who's gone back to work. So obviously, you know, Torquay and Newton Abbot, I think, are now open. But as they've done this, their messaging hasn't been about come and use us because we're open and you can buy a burger. It's been we're opening safely and these are the restrictions that are in place, and it's all about building that confidence piece. I've got a video to share. To be fair, it is quite long, but I think it's a good example of how they've put their marketing spend or time and energy into producing something to instill confidence as opposed to selling burgers. So this has gone out on their social media, it's gone out on YouTube, it's being pushed and promoted in through lots of different channels, but you'll notice it isn't salesy, it's very much informational. So I'll just play this. So like I said, quite a long video. I don't know whether you got the audio on that actually, but their messaging has been very consistent. You'll see they've started to use these little icons, and that's been stuff that's drip fed through to their other materials. And even their e-shots have been confidence based as opposed to sales based. That messaging is clear, it's quite consistent, and you can see that through their insight signage and their social media graphics and content, as well as their emails. So it's all about building confidence and about inspiring confidence and getting people safely back. Now, it will vary. Obviously, if you sell COVID-related products, then your messaging is going to be sales-related. But you still got a confidence element to it because you're needing to promote the reasons why people should be confident in that piece of kit or, you know, whatever it is. So, you know, it varies depending on your business, but I would say fundamentally confidence has got to be the key focus of reopening, key focus of any campaign out there. And then sales is your secondary kind of element, all the follow-up. So as we move into looking at the building blocks, I just wanted to touch upon the foundations of your marketing. So we'll look at building a marketing plan in a moment, but this is really about having the foundations in place to be able to push something out. And depending again on the type of business, the size of your business, will determine what kind of elements you need, to what degree, to how many, and to how much capacity you've got as well. Because if you're a small business, you may not have the capacity to put in, you know, sales systems and all sorts, and it may not be appropriate either. So we're not going to touch very much on this, but what I will do is just highlight two kind of sections or parts of the kind of building blocks. First part is the strategic kind of blocks. So this is doing things like demographic or socioeconomic intelligence or market segmentation. It might sound over the top, or it might sound kind of scary or kind of out there, but I'll touch on that when we get into audiences, because it can be really useful to conduct some customer research. And it's not difficult to do. You can do it relatively easily, and you could do it from a tiny little bit to analysing swaths of data. But really, it's just about getting a real flavour and an idea backed up by data as to who your core target audiences are, because that really then helps you to push and promote and to find the right channels. Ancillary to that is things like doing marketing SWOT analysis. So if you've never done this before, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities of your marketing is a good thing to go through. I know some of these things are quite often just seen as more of a kind of course kind of materials. It's a bit of a tick box exercise, but you can get some benefit out of it if anything you get down on paper what you probably know, but then can objectively look at it and also share that with other people and get other people's input into it. So it can be useful. And the same thing can be said about competitor analysis. So I'm sure you know who your competitors are, but have you ever looked at their pricing? Have you looked at what they push out on social media? Have you ever signed up to their newsletter to try and see what messages they send out? So doing a bit of competitor analysis can be really beneficial. Like I said, I'm sure you know your competitors well enough anyway, but going that extra step, just to do a little bit more digging, can be really useful. And then the second kind of part is the pure kind of building blocks. So those actual systems that sit under most of your marketing. Now again, this will vary depending on your size, but for marketing mechanisms, that will be things like a customer relationship management system. So whatever kind of business you are, you presumably manage your customers through something, whether that just be a basic spreadsheet or it's an all singing, all dancing workflow system, and everything in between. So, do you have a system in place for that? Can you leverage that? Is it robust? Does it do what you need? Same thing with email. I'm sure most people send emails, every day, but how many marketing emails do you send, and do you have a system to do that, or do you just send it through Outlook or Gmail or whatever it is? And we'll cover that a little bit further on, because there's some real benefits to using a system and to sending what I would call more professional marketing email messages. Then things like customer journey. So do you have a customer journey in place? So if someone takes out a new service with you or buys a product from you, is there a journey that you push them onto? Do you send them regular messages or automated messages and things like that? And then finally, channels. So this is things like your website, your social media channels, and so on. Obviously, if you're going to be pushing out campaign stuff, then you need somewhere for that to live. You need somewhere to drive people to get information and to find out about what it is that you actually offer. So fundamentally, I would imagine most people have most of these things kind of sorted in some form or another. Maybe it's a case of just reviewing them, looking at them, seeing whether they are working for you, and adapting or creating any lists of concerns to then have a look at. But we're going to look at audiences. And as I said, most people, I'm sure you will have an idea of who your core audience is. Again, this will be very varied depending on the type of business you have. We can ultimately, as a business, we split them by business to consumer and business to business. So again, depending on the type of business you are and who you work with, there'll be very different types of data and information that you might have about your customers. So there are some very simple ways to do a bit of data analysis on your customers. I say the easiest one is to do something like geolocation. So there's actually tools in systems like Excel. So you can create a map and view a map view of your customers in Excel. Basically, you plug in your data. So you want locations, and then it will effectively create a geographic map for you to show you the heat map distribution of it. Actually quite straightforward. it depends how your knowledge of Excel is, and of course you need the data in the first place. My kind of preference for running kind of map-based analysis is to use something like Google Maps. You can upload a database, so you can upload like an Excel file, a CSV kind of file, and the more data you put into it, the better, because then you can filter it. So this example here, you'll see what happens. It pops little dots on the map where all your customers live, or if they're a business, where they are. And then you can drill into that, you can click into them, you can filter and all that kind of stuff. But the benefit for doing this is that if you, and again, it depends on the type of business you are, but if you are a locational based business, so if you have a geographic boundary, you can see where your customers are in relation to that geographic boundary. And you might find that there are pockets of people in certain places, and that might be due to either proximity to you, or it might be proximity to road networks. So is it easy to get to from certain postcode areas and not others? But then the flip side of that is you can see where you don't have customers coming from, and then you can target those. So if we said, okay, here's a distribution map. If we had our pinpoints of customers on here, we might say, well, actually, we don't have very many from TQ13 or from TQ12. So why is that? Is it because the road network means they're never going to come to us, or is it because it's more rural, or whatever it might be? But you can then either determine whether to target that area or to cross it off your list. And when you get into the likes of doing Facebook ads or Google ads, you can go down on a very specific basis to target or not target these postcodes, or even down to road level. So you can drill in a very long way. The next step on from just doing sort of basic geographic targeting is to then look at things like customer classification and segmentations. And there are big, robust systems out there. This may be complete overkill for some businesses, but I would still say that any business would get some genuine value out of doing this kind of segmentation and classification. If you're in a particular type of industry, there are or tend to be publicly accessible data sources for a lot of different industries out there. So I've just put some examples at the bottom here, but you've got things like Visit Britain, Visit England, the Arts Council, Sport England. If you work in any of those verticals, then they have got toolkits that will enable you to get general classification and segmentation sets, but also you can upload your own data. So, and I've got an example of this in a minute. So Sport England, for instance, you can upload data and then they will tell you, based on who you've put into that, what types of people they are. You can get data from all sorts of places. So there are things like Mintel reports, there are industry reports. So, if you sell kitchens, there's a report on the kitchen industry, what spend is likely to be, what types of customers are buying, and all that kind of stuff. And it's up, all these things are updated regularly. So Mintel's a good source. Google Trends, Google Insights, specialist data sectors. There's census data. There's lots of public open data. Government has a lot of source data as well. So there are lots of places you can go to get this kind of stuff. It depends on your business, what kind of business it is. But you can get more in-depth reports yourself. You can run or pay for a report from places like Acorn or Experian, who have census data as well as survey data and so on, and produce reports like this. Now they can be expensive. I think they tend to be about £100, something like that, and then they go up to like thousands. Most or many agencies like ourselves use stuff like this, and they often will run them for free. So we often run reports like this for free for clients, because if we're planning a campaign, we want to know the makeup of their customers so that we know which areas we need to target when we go onto digital, or if we go offline and do a direct mail. So some agencies will do free reports for you. Many mailing houses as well. If you do direct mail, most direct mail houses will do these reports for you for free as well. And you get all sorts of stuff. So, not just things like age and income and employment, but car type, number of bedrooms in the houses, and you get a real kind of full breakdown. One of the most useful ones is what marketing responses people have to things like leaflet distribution, email, social media, and also what kind of social media channels they use. So you can get some really great intelligence out of them. It can be overkill, particularly for small businesses. But I would say anyone can really benefit from some information in these, if not all of it. But once you get it, you can then work out which areas you're most likely to have customers come from. You can then choose those if you look at postcode distributions and work out where most of those likely people are going to be, and all sorts of stuff. And Experian is the same. It's a bit more visual, but it gives you all the same kind of stuff. But if you don't go down that route, then one thing that you could try, which can be really, really valuable, is to create a pen portrait, or what's called a pen profile. And this is basically a snapshot of your common customers. So if you have, say you had like 5 products, and those 5 products attract a different type of person or a different type of business, then you could create a pen portrait for each of those products. So product 1, who's the most likely person to buy that, or who currently is the most common person that buys that. So you give them a name that's kind of similar to the types of people that buy. Give them an age, or an age banding, a description. So what's their lifestyle like, or depends on your business, but what's their lifestyle like? What are they motivated by, and what are their preferred marketing channels? And then that's something that you can use when you then start to plan a campaign. So you say, okay, well, this is the product. We're targeting Dave, who's aged 50. He's got a such business. He's the decision maker, the MD. He's motivated by cost reduction and time efficiencies. Likes to have information presented statistically or whatever. Preferred marketing channels are email and telephone, for instance. And you suddenly got something that you now have a age and a type. So when you create a leaflet or a graphic, you can make sure that graphic is similar in terms of, if you're going to show a person, then the same kind of age. Or you can use that pen portrait with third parties or other staff. So if you've got new staff, then having pen portraits means they can instantly get a picture of who your kind of target audience is. So if they're then writing copy on your website, or if they're writing or drafting an email, they can write as though they are talking to that person. And it does help people kind of get into a mindset of what tone of language and how to talk to that person and what might motivate them. Like I said, I had an example here. This is the Sport England one. So they have very, very detailed pen portraits. This is Ralph and Phyllis. You can see on here that it's got quite a lot of information, but it's things like the types of newspapers they consume, so the Telegraph, things like magazines like Gardener's World, places that they might shop, the kind of tone of messaging and language, like prestigious or classic or intellectual, trustworthy. So you can put more and more into these kind of things, but they can be very useful, and particularly for new staff, or if you work with agencies, it's useful to give them stuff like that as well. If you don't have your own data, because not every business will collect postcode data or destinational data, they might not have much data outside of just email addresses if you just sell a single product online. But you can get data from other sources. So we touched on Google Trends last week. I'll just briefly mention this again, just because there's one element of it that's useful. So if you plug in a keyword, so in here we did Toolkit, you can then export that data from a location, and then you can see here this is the top 10 places in the UK where people Google for Toolkit, and that's outside of like local based ones, so Bristol and up. So you can then see where are people searching for Toolkit. Now that's just Toolkit. You want to use terms that are relevant to your business, but once you've done that, you've then got a kind of geographic area of where there is interest in your product or your service. And if you're going to do things like Google Ads, you can target more spend in those places because there's more demand. So it's just one example of how you can use that outside of your own data. So in terms of personalization and segment, so audience piece, use geographic data, map your customers if you can. Also use spend data. So if you can export any other information, so like products, if you've got products or services that people have bought from you, then maybe you can see correlation. Most customers that buy this also buy this. So if you can export that, you could probably then create a list of people that have bought this but haven't bought this. And then you've got a target list. So now you've got a target list of people that potentially would want this other product, and you can now run an email campaign or do some telesales, picking up the phone or whatever, to then target them. And then finally, using engagement data. So if you're using an email system, and we'll come on to this next, then you should be able to drill into data to see what have they clicked on, what are they interested in, how can you use that to re-message them and to try and push things. You can also do this offline as well, in terms of going onto other platforms that you don't own, like Twitter, creating things like Twitter lists. And so there are lots of different ways to segment your markets and to view your markets and your audience in different ways. But once we get an understanding of audience, it's then about communicating to them. And probably the biggest opportunity, so before we go into looking at the campaign plan, biggest opportunity every business will always have is re-engaging with your existing customers, because you've done the legwork, they're working with you, and now you can try and engage with them to get more work from them, or to get higher value work, or sell more products or whatever it might be, or repeat visits. So one of the best ways to do that is through email. So email has the highest return on investment of pretty much all marketing channels out there. So there's a report from DMA, excuse me, and they do this report every year. Email is consistently at the top of that list. So this year's report, 2020, it shows that for every £1 you put into email, you get a return of £35.41, which is important, the 41 pence. So you get a return of £35 for every pound you put in, which is that's an amazing return on investment. For things like paid media advertising, you will tend to get about £3 for every £1 that you put in. So you can see how much greater that return is. And since COVID, since the lockdown, email open rates having increased, there is a higher number of open rate, or higher open rate in the afternoon. So if you're going to send your emails, the afternoon is the better time to send them. You get 5% higher, statistically, a 5% higher open rate in the afternoon. If you don't use an email system, then I would strongly advise using one, because you can organize your customers, your subscribers in that system. You can manage them. It will manage your unsubscribes from a GDPR perspective. And it just lifts your email campaigns and just gives them a more branded, professional kind of edge. But it also gives you a load of data. Now, there are lots of systems out there. I've put a few on screen here. We've got our own one, which is eCampaigns, but they are all pretty much the same. They all do the same kind of thing. But they will give you statistics about who's opened your email, how many times have they opened it, what links have they clicked on, and you can gather a lot of data from that. You can create segments for people that have clicked on a certain link, and they're interested in a certain product or a service. So you can do a lot with segmentation on it. But the key is then making that messaging consistent. If it's the first one you're going out with, then using confidence to think of McDonald's again, and that consistent, confident kind of messaging. One note to add on to this is about automation. So I've got an example here, again, of that confidence piece, but also of automation. So on the left-hand side, we've got a prospect email from AO. This is an email they sent to people that have previously purchased from them. So what they're doing is obviously re-engaging with their customers. It's not saying come and buy a washing machine or a fridge or a TV or whatever. It's saying we are open, we are delivering, safety is our priority, and it's a message from their chief exec. And then on the right hand side, is a automated message from a purchase, and you can see at the bottom of there they've got coronavirus advice. So it's all about how they will safely deliver. So they've obviously updated all their automation and their messaging to have that confidence piece built into it. And we'll touch on that again very briefly as we get towards the end. So we've got about another 5 minutes and then we'll open up to questions. But in terms of building your campaign plan, so the first question that most people ask is, well, how much budget should I put into it? So as a general rule, your marketing budget for the year, so not for a comeback campaign, but for the year, generally speaking, it tends to be around 5 to 15% of your total revenue for the year. For your campaign, that will just depend on the type of business that you are and where you are in your cycle. So if seasonality is important to you and you're going into a high season, then obviously a larger proportion of that will be around that comeback piece. If you are in a low season, then it might be touch points building up to something a bit further down the line. So it just depends on your business. But as a general rule, that's overarching marketing budgets that we see most businesses put in place. Startups tend to be a lot higher, so probably around about 20% as you need to build up more momentum. But effectively, what I would suggest you do, you can use online systems, to build a marketing plan, but a simple spreadsheet goes quite a long way. It's a case of, we would say, categorize what type of marketing you're doing. So on this spreadsheet, this is one of the spreadsheets you can get in the toolkit that I'll give a link to at the end. But in the far left-hand column, you've got the type of channel, so paid media, direct advertising, outdoor, point of sale, etc., social, etc. Then you've got type, so what is it? So an e-shot or a billboard advert, or whatever. Then you've got the detail, so e-shot to prospects, e-shot to members, promoting confidence, whatever it might be. Your cost, and then when it's going to hit, so when you want that to go out. And then as you fill that in, you'll get a glorious Gantt chart kind of view, and a costed and made up plan for what you're going to deliver. And then you can get other people involved in that. So in terms of mapping the customer journey to that, we talked about this last week, so I'm not going to go into much detail on it, but we talked about the customer journey that everyone goes on when they buy something. They go through stimulus, so you make them aware of it. Then they go into a research, so ZMOP, then they're looking at where it's cheapest, where they're going to buy it from. Then they buy, and then the second moment of truth is when they experience it, so it turns up in a box, or they take out your services, and they might feed that back in lots of different ways. So I'm just going to go through some of the channels that you could use. There are so many, we're not going to cover them, so I just picked out a couple of things that deliver the highest return, really. Firstly, paid media advertising. If it's stimulus, so if you're trying to get new people, then I'd say use social, use Facebook, LinkedIn if you're B2B, because this is more blanket. You don't know if people have got intent. It's a good starting point. Advertising costs on Google and Facebook are cheaper at the moment because there are less people advertising. So 10 to 15% it was about a week ago. I don't know what that is now. I can't imagine it's changed that much, but as we go on, that will start to move back up again. And then we've got things like offline advertising. So don't forget, some segments, some audiences might not be digital, they might not be online. So you can build good brand presence and awareness through offline advertising as well as PR. So I'm sure all these publications take press releases. I'm sure they all provide news bites from businesses, and of course paid advertising as well. So that they're kind of the more common ones in the Bay. But there are lots of other things to think about in this kind of stimulus kind of stage. Things like outdoor media, direct mails, so purchasing databases, doing direct mail pieces through the door, live events as well. They're probably not going to be live in the sense of people coming together, but it will be in the sense of digital, like this session here. So there are lots of different ways you can create stimulus. The 0 moment of truth, I'm only going to touch on a couple of points here. One is, if you're using paid media, then I would say this is where you'll get the most return, because if you advertise on Google for someone searching for your product or service, then they've got intent. They want to buy it, and you're getting in front of them. So search and display are the best options at that stage. I would say try remarketing. So if you are using Google Ads or Facebook Ads, try remarketing, because this is a great way to keep engaged with someone once they've given up on you as a business. So the way it works, someone comes onto your website, they then are tracked by a cookie, they leave your website, they're gone, and that's where the story would normally end. But you can then serve an advert to them when they're on another website to try and then get them back to your website. Now, that all works using something called pixel tracking, and it can look a bit confusing. It is relatively straightforward. Like Facebook and Google have guides on how to implement this on your website. You can get email instructions that you can then just send to a developer. So if you're running ads, take a look at the options you've got. You can create a pixel for your ads, and then it will give you emailable instructions. Or alternatively, and this is a good recommendation anyway, is to have something called Google Tag Manager set up on your website. That's effectively, think of it like an invisible window on your website where you can drop code into it. It means you don't need a developer to drop code into that. So you can put pixel tracking, or you can even set up Google Analytics by having that little window. It's only visible to you, and it means that you can basically just chuck code into your website. You probably would need a developer to install it in the first place, but once you've done that, you can add all sorts into that. And if you go on to use things like HubSpot or marketing systems, then you can use Tag Manager to implement it. So that's a good system to get installed anyway, I would say. And then finally, landing pages. And again, we talked about this last week. Landing pages convert 3 to 5 times higher than a normal web page. And a landing page is basically stripped down information. So here's one for one of our clients. This is BioZone. They're a global manufacturer and provider of cleaning technology. So they provide like infrared cleaning technology into places like Burger King and so on, and into hospitals and all sorts of hospitality places. This is a landing page for them. It provides all the information about one product on one page with a call to action form and call to actions all throughout it. For them, they don't sell the products online, so it's about an inquiry. But you're basically keeping the person in one place, and then they don't jump off somewhere else. So I would say definitely try and use a landing page. And then the last piece of the puzzle is to think about what you can put into your plan for those that are signing up or becoming customers. And we talked again last week about using something called social proof, which is where you use the praise you can get from your peers to promote yourselves, and that's through testimonials or case studies or reviews, as is the case here. And there are lots of different systems. Ren, they're currently running a big push to try and get people to leave reviews. You can see why, because you look at our closest store from here, which is Exeter, they've got 12 Google reviews, and they're sending out messages offering people a £20 voucher to leave a review. So it's obviously worth something to them to do that. While we're on that point, I would say don't forget to include in your plan to update your Google My Business account. Again, last week we talked about how there are new elements in there that you can use while we're in this restrictive period. So you can mark it as temporarily closed, but don't forget to mark it as open again at the other side of it. And also, if you add a COVID update, then update that with your confidence piece about what you're doing. And then similarly, I'd say don't forget to update things like autoresponders and messages. So if you have a contact form on your website and it currently says something like, we'll get back in touch in 24 hours, if that's changed during this period or it's changing after it, then don't forget to update that message to whatever the new bit of info is. And a reminder of how that kind of filters into things like orders if you're e-commerce, with things like your confidence piece on deliveries. So our final step, and then we'll open up to questions, is about measurement. This is a very short section, this. I'd say if you only measure one thing, measure sales, because that's your measure of success, financial one. How many sales did you generate? If you can measure more than one, then measure leads. So how many people's details have we collated? that have then helped us make that sale. And if you can measure 3, measure engagement. So that's how many people liked your Facebook post, how many people visited your website, how many people have watched your YouTube video. And then if you can measure 4 things, measure reach, which is how many people have we reached with our campaign. So how many people have been exposed to our adverts, how many emails have we sent out. So not how many people have opened them, but how many have we sent out. What's your total reach? And it will normally be hundreds of thousands, tens of thousands, thousands and hundreds. Again, depending on your business, but you tend to see that kind of large down to small. And then the final 2 things are, for measurement, use Google Analytics. We talked about that last week. Again, you get an awful lot of rich data out of that, and you can see whether people are converting on your website, whether your pages actually are working. So certainly install it if you don't have it. Use it and look at it if you have got it. If you've never looked at it, then go in and play around with it. And the final 2 slides are on training that is available out there. This is free training. So Google have got analytics academies. So they've got ones on Google Analytics, but also one on Tag Manager. So if you want to know how to use them or you want to know how to install them, then you can do those. You get a certificate at the end. So those that like certificates, it's a big yay. And also there's Google Digital Garage. So if anybody went to the Torbay Business Forum Festival, the business festival, you may have seen someone from Google presenting on a lot of this stuff. These are online courses that you can take. It gives you lots of information on data, tech, digital marketing, and so on. Really great resources, and they're free. So I would definitely take advantage of that, particularly if you have got downtime. You know, unfortunately, if businesses aren't operating, you may have time to do that. And that's kind of it. The final thing I'll leave you with is the toolkit. So if you want a toolkit, we've prepared one that's got a marketing plan template. It's in Excel. You saw a snapshot of it earlier. There's also a campaign brief, so you can write, you know, who your target audience is, what your objective is, and so on, just to be clear about it. And maybe share that with staff and colleagues, or if you work with agencies, share it with them. And then a campaign guide. So what are you actually doing? What's your objectives, etc. That you can then again share with staff, so they know what materials are going out there, when it's hitting, etc. And then a report template, so that you can report on it, and it uses that funnel, so it's quite clear and concise. I will drop this on screen, and I'll leave this up before I hand back. But this is 10 actions to take. We have covered a fair bit, and I appreciate we've chopped around a little bit there, but I've pulled out the 10 probably most useful things that you could be doing in terms of preparing a campaign to kind of bounce back. And I'll leave that on screen with the URL. And then I think we'll open up to any questions. We've got a few minutes left.
Okay, thanks, Simon. Lots of food for thought there. We did have a question. Sarah, I think, wanted to ask a question about GDPR.
Yes, please. So I work for Torbay Coast and Countryside Trust, and we have a membership scheme. As part of the membership scheme, they opt in to receive newsletters and information from us. They can either choose mail or email to do that. Normally we would communicate with our members 3 times a year, and maybe with the email members a bit more than that, because it's easier. This crisis has thrown up a need to communicate with the members more, so we're just about to do a CEO letter to update membership, but we've had to do a mailing alongside an email. But out of the people that have signed up to receive mail, we've also got their email addresses. Are we allowed to email them if their preference is for mail?
Yes, you can, because the GDPR allows you to email on 2 different instances. So one is for marketing, and that's where you've asked them if they're okay to accept and so on. Yeah. The other is you can email them if they provided their details, if it's operationally based around their subscription or their membership or whatever, you know. So in your case, it'd be membership. So if it's something that impacts on what they've taken up with you, and it's a core part of that product or that offering, then yes, you can communicate that through that email. So I would say you'd be fine to do that. If you want to share with me the text that you've done, I can have a proper look at that. I'd be happy to do that.
Okay.
But yeah, I would say you can. And I would use this as an opportunity to also put a message in that around how during this, during the current circumstances, that it is easier for you to convey information via email and to try and get more people to sign up to having regular email contact from you. It's a good opportunity to do that. And I think most people would be understanding of that.
Okay, that's great. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thanks, Simon. I've got a quick question from Jules Roberts. How would you recommend a business decides on what social media platform is best suited to their customer base? And if there's more than one, how best to manage content output on more than one platform?
Okay, yes. So I would map it to your customers. So doing that audience research, if you've got certain demographic groups, so if you know that there's a certain age, for instance, then have a look at, there's a website called Sprout Social. They publish some really interesting blog pieces and infographics about demographics and age groups, particularly, that use different channels. So find the ones where most of your audience are going to be. That's always, is always the best kind of route to go. So just find, what channels do most of your audience use. If that's not obvious from the data that you've got, or you can't determine that, then maybe try a survey. If it's easy to survey your customers or your clients, then try doing it that way. If you've got a website, stick a poll up or ping out a Survey Monkey survey, or if you use Google Forms or anything like that, just ping that out and just try and get some feedback. In terms of how to manage across different channels, the best thing to do is to set up a social dashboard. So there's lots of different systems out there, like Sprout Social is one, but Hootsuite, so we use Hootsuite with a lot of our clients, and there's tons of other ones, but they'll all allow you to post your message across multiple channels from one dashboard login. I would say still tailor your message though. So if you've got Facebook and LinkedIn and Instagram and Twitter, then use your dashboard, but send different messages, because you will have different audiences on those different channels. Even if you do have the same, still variant it, because you can use different syntax. Like you could put more hashtags on Instagram than you would on Facebook, or you've got higher character counts on LinkedIn than you do on Twitter. So still variant it and send separately, but through that one dashboard, and it will save you logging into lots of different places.
Excellent, thanks. And I think that might be it.
Great. Okay.
So, yeah. Thank you, Simon. Thanks everybody for attending. We hope to see you all next week for another session on funding. Have a great day.